Hey guys, today I'm going to give you all the details on the DJI Power. This is the 1 kilowatt super fast car charger. Now in a previous video I did a full comparison on the DJI ecosystem, their power ecosystem versus the EcoFlow ecosystem. That's a lot of ecos right there. But if you didn't catch that video, I'll put a card up above and a link in the description below. And I basically compared the power stations. You can see here I've got the DJI Power 1000 against the EcoFlow counterpart and of course their DC to DC chargers. However, in today's video, I'm going to focus just on the DJI Superfast car charger. I'm going to go over the install details. I actually installed it on my truck here. This is my 2024 GMC Sierra 2500 HD. So I'm going to go over all the install details and all the extra parts that you need to make it nice and clean on your truck. And more importantly, I'm going to cover all the testing that I've completed on this product. I mean, does it actually deliver as promised? Because to my knowledge, I believe this is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful DC to DC chargers on the market at present. 1 kilowatt, that's 1,000 watts. And then guys, stick around to the end because I'm going to share a potential compatibility, or I should say nuance, with really any DC to DC charger and GM pickup trucks with their electrical system. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to discuss, are these DC to DC chargers a good idea, or are they going to destroy the alternator in your vehicle? So definitely stick around to the end. Now to kick things off, let me answer the question first. Why would you want to install a DJI Power super fast car charger or any DC to DC charger on your vehicle in the first place, right? And I'd say it really all comes down to speed and convenience. For example, I've got down here the DJI Power 1000 power station, and let's say I'm using this on the go, and so then I need a means to rapidly recharge it while I'm on the go. Well, I can certainly take this power station and plug it into a standard vehicle 12-volt power outlet, and I'm probably going to get, about 100 watts of input, of charging input out of that standard 12-volt power outlet that, most cars have. So that means it's going to take about 10 to 12 hours to charge a power station like this one here. Well, imagine being able to supercharge it, and instead of it taking 10 to 12 hours, you can do it in about an hour to an hour and a half. And that is precisely what the DJI 1 kilowatt super fast car charger does. It supplies 1,000 watts of charging input. So, 1,000 watts versus 100 watts. It's 10 times faster, and that's what makes this a game changer. Now, on a related note, if I may anticipate 2 questions or 2 objections that you may have. Let's say you're watching this and you say, but wait a second, my vehicle already has a more powerful AC inverter that I could use to charge the power station. This particular truck has a 400 watt inverter. Well, not all power stations will accept power from these built-in inverters because they're not all pure sine wave inverters. Some of these are modified sine wave inverters that work for some appliances, lighter, under 400 watts, but they don't always work on power stations. And so that's one problem with these guys. Of course, they're limited to 400 watts on a lot of vehicles, so 400 versus 1,000. But the second thing I want to address and anticipate is you might be looking at all this and saying, well, that's great, 1,000 watts versus 100, but when am I going to have the need for all of this? Or when do I have the need to recharge that quickly, right? And I think this is one of those things where you have to experience this technology first, and then suddenly you will develop more use cases that are very personal to the way you, go out camping or do day trips or maybe related to your job. And you'll realize all the different things that you can do with this particular setup. So I really do think it is something you have to experience firsthand. But guys, do me a favor, if you're watching this and you can already think of different use case scenarios, maybe in your job or the way you like to go out and enjoy adventures, definitely drop comments below. I think it's always interesting to hear about specific use cases and the way folks plan to use this particular technology. And guys, just to give you a practical use case scenario, I previously published a video where I detailed a specific setup where I use a 12-volt refrigerator when we're out camping or doing day trips. in conjunction with this power station and the super fast car charger. And I mean, you can hook up a portable sandwich maker, you know, a griddle, all kinds of different electric appliances and use them on the go. And so I really do think it is a game changer, especially when you're able to charge up to 1,000 watts. But folks, let me get to the meat of the video here and talk about all the install details. You probably already noticed that it is installed on my truck right here. And so let me cover first what you get with the kit. You can see, of course, that is the super fast car charger, the DC to DC charger. And then you also get the cable that runs between it and the power station. It's plugged into one of the SDC ports right there. And over here, I've got the installation instructions. And so what you're looking at right there is essentially a schematic of the basic install details. So feel free to pause the video. But basically, in addition to the DC to DC charger right there and the cable that connects to the power station, there's another cable that they provide, which is about 16 feet. And that's going to be long enough for, you know, the average vehicle. I'll show you all those details on my truck here in just a minute. But that 16-foot cable is a thicker gauge wire, two wires actually, a positive and a negative or a ground, and that runs to your car's battery. Now, DJI also supplies an inline fuse with the kit. It's a 100 amp MIDI fuse, and so that's there for protection. But those are the basic components that are included with the kit. Now, depending on your vehicle and just really your install preferences, there may be some extra parts that you need. I'll go over what I used in particular. First was I bought some extra plastic loom right here. This is a 3/4 inch size. And actually the DJI cables have their own loom on them already. I'll give you a close-up of what it looks like here. It's more of a flexible, kind of a braided, woven type loom, and that's on both the supply cable going to the power station, but also the wires that feed the 12 volt into the unit itself. But I like this loom on the outside. It's a little more robust and durable, especially since I ran the cables, you know, underneath the vehicle where the frame is. And so I think this is cheap insurance just to give it another layer of protection. By the way, guys, I'll put links to all these different products down below if you're interested in purchasing them. So I appreciate you using them to help support the channel. But that's the wire loom. Then as far as securing the cables to your vehicle, I used a combination of these little clips right here. You have to have sheet metal screws to go into sheet metal. And then of course you just put some zip ties on them to secure the cable. But I also want to show you these guys right here. Check this out. It's got a little magnet, one of those rare earth magnets on the bottom, and then a standard little clip on it for zip ties. And so what's nice about this, if your car is made out of steel and it's, you know, ferrous, then you don't have to drill into the vehicle or the sheet metal. And these are very strong. I actually discovered these when I was doing an overlander, kind of an off-road trailer build, and they're very useful. They're a little bit expensive because of the magnets, but I think they're really great. And so I used a combination of these and just regular old-fashioned zip tie clips to get everything secured. Then the last thing that I did on my vehicle, again, this is a GMC Sierra 2500 HD, I had to use this install kit. This is from GM right here. And basically this gives me easier access to connect the 12 volt leads to my vehicle's battery system. You can see over here, it kind of shows you how you're connecting those ring terminals to your vehicle's battery. And GM has kind of a fancy connection right there on their vehicles. And so this kit right here makes it just a little bit easier to do this install. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm on the passenger side of the engine compartment here on my truck, and the battery is actually under this cover right here. And so if this looks similar to your GM truck, then chances are you've got a similar setup. But let's go ahead and remove this cover. There's two clips on either side, and then you can get a better idea of what is going on. So GM uses this kind of like a fancy distribution panel that's got fuses on it. And so in order to connect to your battery, you know, most cars you're just going to see a red terminal and a black terminal. You can just connect straight on that. But this is different right here, the way it's all set up. And you'll notice here on my truck, depending on how your truck is optioned, you might have all of these in use. You might have some surplus ones. You can see I actually do have two surplus channels right here, a 100 amp and an 80 amp. So technically I could have just hooked up to this one right here being 100, and that would have been fine. The downside to using these right here is you'll notice those fuses are permanently attached to this bus bar, this distribution bar. And so if that blows, you have to replace this entire module. And that is where this part comes into handy. This is kind of like if you wanted to install a snowplow or something, a heavy draw appliance on your truck. You buy this kit, and basically it gives you this additional bar right here and all these little nuts and bolts so that you can add an auxiliary device and put fuses there. So you can see that's what I installed there. And then I used this one right here, put a 100 amp fuse right there. And then this is the 12 volt positive lead that goes all the way back to the DJI Superfast car charger. So this is the wire that was supplied by DJI. In fact, you'll notice here is the fuse block, the inline fuse that they give you. And so it's actually double fused right here. If you've noticed that, there's a 100 amp fuse here and another one there. Technically, I only need this one here, but I went ahead and just kept it because I needed that length there. So that's the positive. And then the negative is going to be back here. You can see it's all the way back tucked into the corner. And let me just say something about GM trucks that I learned. I didn't know this, but GM trucks use a pretty fancy electrical system that has EPM, electrical power management. And basically what it means is GM is measuring the current that is going out of the battery. And then the computer tries to make intelligent decisions as to, how much alternator is needed to keep the system recharged. And then also at times it will choose to let the battery voltage drop to about 12.6 in my experience in order to save fuel while you're driving. Maybe when you're not using a lot of appliances while driving, it'll step that voltage down to prolong the life of the battery and of course give you a little bit better fuel economy. Now it's my understanding that this system from GM, the EPM, and there's lots of other systems with acronyms related to it, but it's my understanding that this basic system has been around for quite some time, since about 2005 or so. And guys, full disclosure, I am not a mechanic. I am not an expert on this system from GM by any means, but I wanted to bring it up because it's super important that when you're installing the DJI Superfast car charger that you get the negative cable on the right side of that negative terminal. You don't want it touching the negative terminal and then bridging the gap across that shunt, because then that's going to throw off the way that GM measures the current. And so you can see the negative cable right here. This is again supplied by DJI. I was very careful to go up and around and make sure that it's secured to the negative post on the right side so that it doesn't interfere, with that EPM system. Okay, next let me talk about how I routed the cables between the battery on my truck and the rear in the bed there. I mean, guys, this is gonna vary depending on your specific truck, your vehicle, and the application. But this is a question that I find people always wanna know is, how did you do the wiring and where did you run the wires? And so I'm gonna step back here, and that way you can kind of get a full view of the truck. And so again, my battery's on the passenger side right here, and so I showed you all that. And basically the positive and negative run down behind this wheel well right here, and then kind of right next to the frame. I actually didn't mount it on the frame. I went to the sheet metal on this lower panel of the actual body here of the cab, and I'll show you that here in just a second. But it basically just runs all along here, protected. And then it jumps up here right where the body, the cab, and the truck bed meet. I went right up through that gap, and then there already were some holes in my truck bed. And so I just went straight into those holes. There was a little kind of a plastic cover, a grommet installed. I just popped it out. And then there was plenty of room to get those wires to where I mounted the DC to DC charger. Now I'm up under my truck now, looking toward the front. So that is the front passenger tire right there. And you can see the cable running behind the wheel well. So basically, I decided to attach mine to the actual sheet metal here. This is the cable continuing on. And this is basically the backside of the cab, kind of the lower portion of the sheet metal that drops down. And it's pretty much hollow. And so that is where I decided to mount mine. And I actually went through also these little slots right here where the running boards, these side steps, are attached as well. And so you can kind of see where I put these little connectors here to put the zip ties and attach them to the sheet metal, and it basically just runs all the way along the side. And then we're getting to the rear of the cab here, and you can see then where it runs up to the actual bed right there. So let me talk about how I secured it, because I chose to use some conventional, zip tie clips that screw into the sheet metal. And guys, let me just say, this sheet metal is some tough stuff. There's not a lot of room to get a drill or an impact driver in here, and I really struggled to get these clips mounted. And so I think one thing that I probably would do differently is, instead of using the traditional, clips with screws, I would just use these magnetic guys all over. I use these in my bed, but these are really strong, and I really don't think there's any reason to drill into that sheet metal as strong as these are, especially since I went through the kind of this little slot right here with the side steps. So that's definitely one thing I would do differently. Again, guys, I'll put links below where you can get these handy little magnetic clips for the zip ties to secure the wires. But basically, once I followed up the back of the truck bed there, I already had this hole right here, and there was just a plastic grommet cover right there. And this was all done by the manufacturer ahead of time. So I just popped that grommet out and had plenty of room to feed the cable through there. And then I just continued on kind of under the side of the bed rails right here, and then mounted the DC to DC charger right there. So to secure all those wires, it was really easy. I just used these magnetic little clips right here. The bed is ferrous, and so these stick very nicely and securely. And so I just put a couple of those kind of up in there, you can see, and that way I didn't have to drill anything. Just makes for a really clean install. Then as far as mounting the actual unit, you can see I did mine just above the passenger side wheel well in the truck. In GM trucks, these walls inside the bed are kind of pushed outward to maximize cargo volume, and you can see they've got all these fancy different little cutouts and sections. And so this particular section right here, directly above the wheel well, happened to be just the right size to accommodate the footprint of the DJI DC to DC charger. You can see it just barely fits there on that raised section. So I just used sheet metal screws and secured it there to the sidewall of my bed. You can see it's actually upside down, but that's just because my cables are coming from this direction, from the front. And again, I barely had enough length here to get it to that point. And I really like this because it's, kind of semi-protected under the side of the bed rails, the way they're pushed, in with the walls, or pushed out, I should say. And then I also happen to have these extra rails right here from the tonneau cover, and so that gives even greater protection. So I mean, even if I was driving around with my tonneau cover opened, there's a good 4 inches or so of protection where the unit's pushed further back in, where, even if there was a light drizzle or a rain, that this would be, largely kept out of the rain. Most of the time I'm driving around, I've got my tonneau cover closed. This is not waterproof, by the way. And so, I just mentioned that because this is how I chose to install it. But again, every vehicle is going to be a little bit different. Okay, so those are the basic install details. Guys, if I left anything out that you're curious about, please do comment below and ask your question. I'll be glad to answer it. But next I want to talk about testing the unit. I mean, does it actually deliver as promised? And guys, I really wanted to do some thorough testing on this device, especially because it's one of the more powerful ones, or the most powerful one that I'm aware of that's on the market right now at 1 kilowatt. Does it actually deliver, or is that 1 kilowatt, something that's not attainable for most folks? So I've been doing a lot of testing over the last few weeks, and I'm going to show you just a real-time sample here next and give you an idea of how the device actually performs. Okay, so I've got the DJI Home app. That is the companion app that interfaces with the DJI Power system there. So I've got that running on the phone, and we'll put that up as well. One thing I will mention is, before you set up and connect the DJI DC to DC charger, make sure the firmware is up to date. I know I had to update the firmware, I think 3 or 4 times in a row to get the power station, the DC to DC charger, and everything else, up to the most recent firmware to support the full capabilities of the system. So definitely do the firmware updates first. Okay, so while that's all running, I'll go ahead and get the truck started up here, and then we'll pay particular attention to what the DJI system does. Gotta love the sound of that Borla exhaust. Sounds amazing on a naturally aspirated V8 engine. But let's take a look here and see what the DC to DC charger is doing. Again, guys, this is real time. All right, we can see that the unit is starting to ramp up there. We're well above 600 watts and climbing over 700 watts. And guys, I've noticed the DJI system is pretty conservative, so it kind of gradually ramps up. And we are going almost up to 900 watts. Now, I will mention the truck is idling right now, and so, you know, the alternator is not going to be spinning as fast and generating as much power compared to if I was actually on the road. But I mean, that is pretty impressive that we're already up over 800 watts and I'm idling. All right, so I'm no longer idling. I'm on the road now. By the way, guys, I don't think idling is the best use case scenario for a DC to DC charger, especially one that's more powerful like the DJI super fast car charger. But you can see once the RPMs are up there, I mean, look at that. We're getting 1,060, not just 1,000 watts, but over 1,050. And that's really consistently been what I've gotten as I've been testing it over the last few weeks. I've been driving it and just trying to really see how does this device actually perform and does it actually deliver? And so what you're seeing right here is just typical results. Well over 1,000 watts. I think that's really neat. Not only do they advertise 1 kilowatt, but it actually delivers over 1,000. And so you can see there, we are up to 62%, 30 minutes, and I'm gonna have a fully topped off battery. Remember, if I was gonna do this through a standard 100 watt, you know, DC car charger, just plugging into that cigarette lighter outlet, it would take probably 10 to 12 hours or more. And so I think that's really where this is a game changer. Now let me briefly talk about one nuance that I alluded to earlier, having to do with the GM trucks, essentially, the GM electrical architecture, EPM for short, and there's, like I said before, other acronyms and systems related to it all. But basically, in a nutshell, that EPM is designed to save fuel, so that if the demands on the alternator, on the electrical system are lower, it'll go into sometimes a fuel saving mode where it actually drops the battery voltage around 12.6 volts. And so here's the potential kind of compatibility issue, kind of a nuance is, you know, the DC to DC charger, the DJI version at least, has a minimum charging threshold setting. And by default, it's set to 12.8 volts. You can bring it all the way down to 12.6. All right, that's important because if the GM EPM goes into that fuel saving mode and it lowers the battery voltage to 12.6 volts, then the DJI system is going to think that the battery, the alternator, you know, is overtaxed essentially, and it's not going to ramp up to the full charging rate. And guys, part of the reason why I delayed putting this video out and did so much testing is there were a few occasions while I was testing the super fast car charger and it wouldn't quite ramp up to that full 1,000 watts. In fact, it would kind of hesitate and go around 100 watts, 200 watts, and then back down to 0. And basically what was happening is the truck, the EPM, was going into a fuel saving mode where it was dropping the battery voltage down to about 12.6 volts. And so it made the DJI system think that the alternator wasn't powerful enough to keep up with the demands of the DC to DC charger, and therefore it wouldn't pull, you know, amperage through the alternator, through the battery system in the truck. And so I really wanted to find out and dig deeper, you know, how can I disable that EPM or trick it and turn it off? There's a lot of documentation online, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but basically things like turning on tow haul mode, turning your headlights on, turning the air conditioner on max, you know, all things that would tell the truck, hey, get out of that fuel saving mode, I need more power. And what I found is doing those things does seem to work. It's not always instantaneous. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay, but it does ultimately get out of that fuel saving mode and the battery voltage goes back up, and then the DJI system realizes, hey, I can ramp back up, you know, to the full 1,000 watts. And so really that's the nuance, the potential compatibility issue. You know, it's almost like a battle between the truck's electrical system and the DJI system, because the DJI system doesn't want to overtax the vehicle, right, and draw too much power. Well, the truck isn't communicating with the DJI system other than monitoring the load. The DJI system is very conservative, and so it's kind of this battle back and forth. Now, I'll also mention that you can actually throttle down the recharging power there from 100 watts all the way up to 1,000. And so if you don't need that full 1,000 watts, there's really no need to have it recharge that fast. And then, like I said, in the app, you can also control the minimum voltage of the battery before it recharges. And I've experimented with that, you know, between 12.8 is what it's set to from the factory, going down to 12.6. Either one of those seems to work. I mean, the challenge is with that GM EPM system, when it goes into the fuel saving mode, 12.6 is about where it wants to keep the battery voltage. So there are some other DC to DC chargers from competitors where it lets you take that voltage down even further to 12 volts. So I just wonder if in a future software update, if they were to give more flexibility on that voltage range, if maybe that would help. And then the DJI system would start charging and the GM EPM would realize it and then get out of that fuel saving mode. So maybe that could happen in a future software update. So guys, yeah, it works. It delivers as promised. I mean, we're up to 84% on the battery. Started out in the low 40s. I was probably driving around for about 30 minutes or so in total. So yeah, I think that's pretty impressive. Just keep in mind that one potential compatibility issue, that nuance with the GM EPM system, getting out of that fuel saver mode. You got to convince the vehicle to get out of that mode to get the full alternator power. Now, on that note, at the beginning of the video, I did promise that I was going to answer a very important question. And that is, are these DC to DC chargers a good idea? Whether it's the DJI Super Fast Car Charger or Bluetti or EcoFlow, are they a good idea for your vehicle in the first place? Or are they simply going to destroy your vehicle's alternator? Because it's basically pulling from the alternator and telling the alternator to run harder and stronger in order to output the power that is in turn going into the battery. So are they a good idea? And you'll hear a lot of different opinions online. I've heard some people say, you know, don't do it. They destroy and ruin your alternator. And then others say, yeah, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. But I have yet to find actual numbers and data to show really a definitive answer to that question. Now, I was going to put it in this video, but I realized it's getting a little bit long in the video. And so I'm actually going to make a separate video where I answer that question. Are these DC to DC chargers a good idea, or are they going to destroy your vehicle's alternator? So stay tuned for that video in the future. Guys, if you have any questions about this DJI Super Fast Car Charger, definitely drop your questions and comments below and I'll be glad to answer them. If you're interested in purchasing any of these products that you saw today in the video, from the DJI products to all the different install accessories that I showed you, I will include affiliate links down below, so I appreciate you using those to help support the channel. As always, thanks for watching.